It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
Chemical winter weather warfare rages on in select locations in the most populated portions of the U.S., but elsewhere, a very different story is playing out. First, from the sun.com, Florida colder than Iceland after record low temperatures and all flights grounded at major international airport. From the report in the Sunshine State, the Tampa, St. Petersburg area saw snow flurries while temperatures dropped to the low 20s on Sunday. That was colder than Iceland, which saw temperatures of almost 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Imagine that. From AccuWeather, this: Florida growers battle freeze as temperatures plunge, threatening crops, damaging crops. That's the actual story. Overnight lows again in the 20s. Expert warns crop damage may impact future harvests. How could it not? Also from AccuWeather, storm to bring new stripe of snow for southern Virginia and North Carolina. The report then states the lingering cold across the east is setting the stage for another wave of snow for some areas of the southern United States this week. Yes, a stripe of snow, because that's so natural, right? Like the past satellite image geoengineeringwatch.org captured of a 10-mile wide and 300-mile long stripe of snow across completely flat Kansas. Just nature. Couldn't be the straight trajectory of a geoengineering jet spewing his toxic chemical ice nucleating elements, which, of course, is 1,000 times more plausible than blaming nature. Back to Florida's freak flash freeze. From extremetemps.com, this week's cold blast was a total freak show. Dozens of record lows were broken. That just doesn't happen in Florida anymore. Until now. End of headline. Report says since 2020, Tampa and Miami have only had one record low each, both this season. Fort Myers had 2 record lows, but each city has had well over 100 record highs. Translation: record highs are outnumbering record lows about 100 to 1. Anyone see a trend here besides the chemical ice nucleation short-term toxic cooldown? And this kind of chemical flash freeze absolutely decimates the flora and the fauna. On that note, this week on the Matrix Money Printer-owned Weather Channel, the scheduled weather script reading climate engineering cover-up clowns that we are told are meteorologists were joking about all the iguanas that were laying all over the ground in so many parts of Florida, many of them dead. And about the iguanas that somehow managed to survive the winter weather warfare chemical ice nucleation flash freeze. From the UK Guardian, this headline: Florida euthanizes 5,000 iguanas after cold snap stuns the invasive reptiles. Florida wildlife officials culled the non-native reptiles after thousands were cold stunned and dropped from trees. The public is permitted to humanely kill green iguanas year-round on their property. It all sounds so sterile, doesn't it? But it isn't. Forgive me. I feel compelled to rant for a minute or two. I hope I'm allowed that. After 20 plus years of non-stop slogging in this battle, I have never left my post, ever. Many bad news breaking reports on the other side of this. Thank you for your patience. But first, for the record, the current species extinction rate is 10 to 15,000 times the background rate on a geologic timescale. Global wildlife populations are down 75% in the last 40 years alone. And that's from already depleted populations. Insect populations down 80 to 90% globally. That's terrestrial and aquatic insects. Global tree cover down 66+% over pre-civilization levels. And the remaining trees are in sharp decline. Ozone layer tanking. Direct sun feels intense because it is. Climate engineering is destroying the ozone layer. And no, it's not hairspray cans, and no, it's not getting better. That narrative is a blatant lie. So, for all the Floridians that may feel justified killing the remaining threads of life, in this case, the spectacular green iguanas, that have somehow managed to hang on through all the complete contamination of the planet and many trying to kill them, I ask you to ponder such a practice. Ultimately, it is us, the human race, that are the invaders, taking over and destroying, looting, plundering, pillaging, and polluting until absolutely nothing is left, with climate engineering raging above it all. completely contaminating, again, virtually everything everywhere, no exceptions. And yes, I'm fully aware that the iguanas are not a native species in the U.S., but that matters not for me. And whatever inconvenience they may cause, they're a part of the web of life. It isn't their fault that they were brought here to live. I live in the middle of now dying wilderness in Northern California, fully off-grid for a quarter of a century, 25 years. In years past, I commonly had bears in my yard, front yard and backyard, more times than I could count. And mischievous bears did considerable damage to infrastructure on and around my mountaintop off-grid home. When it happened, yes, I did complain about them under my breath, but I would never cull them. I am the invader, not them. So many times during solo trekking sabbaticals through very rugged, trailless canyons, ridges, and valleys in my wilderness, I would encounter them, the bears. We would sometimes play a form of cat and mouse. When I would move, they would move, especially on the occasions when we were in close proximity but couldn't see each other. This was always a game of sorts. I never felt fear toward them, nor do I believe that they feared me. I believe that the bears somehow know that I consider them to be sacred, like all threads in the web of life. On one occasion, a cougar from behind the trees before me emerged, and though I was cautious, I was not afraid. I believe he sensed this, that I would never harm him. I remained facing this cougar about 50 feet away. I slowly walked backward down the ridge, and he followed, but not threateningly, not at all. He kept his distance, but he followed. It was summer, it was hot, it was very dry. The only available water was far below in the canyon. I slowly maneuvered behind a rock escarpment out of his sight, but I certainly knew he was close. I pulled off my pack, pulled out a plastic storage container, and emptied it into the pack so that I could use the container for a water bowl. I poured water into the container from my canteen, and I poured it from above my head so the sound of water could easily be heard by my newfound friend, who I believed to be just above my head in the rocks. I took my pack, I left the water bowl, and moved slowly down the ridge, crouching behind more rocks, perhaps 50 feet from the water. It wasn't much more than a minute or two, and out he came. Yes, he had heard the sound of water. He leapt down from the granite escarpment near the water. He could now smell it. He certainly knew where I was. He didn't care. He felt no threat from me, and he drank. I looked on. Such a miraculous creature. It was the closest I had ever been to one of them. And now today, the formerly thriving wilderness that surrounds my off-grid home is deathly still and deafeningly silent. It absolutely breaks my heart, and so many all over the world, and this kind of dying of everything in the web of life is happening all over the globe, and people going about their life as if this paradigm is going to continue as it is. I digress. Please forgive me for ranting, but it so pains me to ponder all that has now been lost forever, and no, it's not coming back in any time frame that matters. Back to the chemically flash-frozen Florida and the fate of the iguanas. Will their fate soon enough be ours? How could it not be? Do the powers that shouldn't be care about us any more than the countless forms of life that are being wiped out all over the world? No. In fact, as I've stated in so many broadcasts so many times, populations are a rapidly increasing liability for the controllers. Again, don't forget the over 2 billion rounds of 40 caliber hollow point bullets that U.S. agencies like Homeland Security purchased in 2012. Are the bullets Plan C? If Plan A and B don't get the job done, we'll find out soon. In fact, far sooner than almost any yet dare to imagine. A final report to consider about the chemical flash freeze in Florida, the weather terrorists that carried it out, and the Matrix media cowards whose job it is to cover it all up. From FloridaToday.com, contrails signs of cold weather are not nefarious actions. That's from Jim Waymer, W-A-Y-M-E-R. Here's the report. Conspiracists view vivid vapor trails crisscrossing the skies as proof our government is pumping chemicals into the atmosphere for sinister schemes. Stop. Jim Waymer, I have a question for you. Once populations finally wake up to what's being done to them from the skies by governments around the globe without our knowledge or consent, and the same populations realize that you played your part for the power structure by pushing the completely worn out just a conspiracy theory cover-up mantra, how do you think justifiably enraged populations are going to feel about you, Jim? Question, Should climate engineering denial author Jim Waymer be sent a link to the dimming with an open CC to as many other aware and awake activists as possible? Should all climate engineering cover-up authors be sent the same? You decide. And if you do send any message to Matrix media minions like Jim, keep the message peaceful and professional. That's very important. That's how we gain ground in this fight. More on the recent winter weather warfare, which Jim wants us to believe is just harmless jet exhaust. Nothing to see here, so says Jim Waymer from FloridaToday.com. Final excerpt, Florida bans geoengineering that doesn't exist. Florida's own agencies found no active geoengineering or weather modification programs operating before the state ban. Stop. Really? For the record, some honorable and courageous individuals in top Florida agencies are absolutely aware of and against the ongoing and accelerating climate engineering assault. I'm communicating directly with them on weekly conference calls. I'll provide updates when I can. This is Dane Wigington. You're listening to the weekly installment of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News Report, the end of the world as we know it broadcast. That's a quite literal statement, by the way. Brought to you by Geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world and the subject of global climate engineering operations, aka weather warfare. Quick footnote for those that truly want to help sound the alarm. Very effective climate engineering awareness-raising materials are available on the homepage of Geoengineeringwatch.org. Full-color printed materials with shocking images. We pass these printed materials on for less than our cost of producing and shipping. We have Geoengineering Watch shirts, also restock sizes and colors, and all of these are exceptional tools for starting a conversation on this incredibly dire issue. And reaching a critical mass of awareness is the only way forward in this fight. Search the activist suggestions link on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org to find out why this is so. And this effort will take all of us. The few can't move this fight forward on behalf of the many. It will take all of us. Moving on from numerous sources, temperature in Cuba hits 0 degrees centigrade, 32 degrees Fahrenheit, for the first time in recorded history. Imagine that. And if you went a stone throw distance to the east, to some of the other islands east of Cuba, you'd hit tropical temperatures again. Cuba also a victim of winter weather warfare, surface wind flow manipulation, and chemical ice nucleation. All patented processes, by the way. Search the geoengineeringwatch.org extensive list of patents. Take a look. From extremetemps.com, the cold arriving in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic this weekend will be next level. They have a lot planned. They want to make the biggest impression they can before meltdown returns to most of the country. Wait and see, because that's exactly what's coming. They can't keep the chemical nucleation operations going for that long over that big of an area, and the record warm rebound comes right back afterward with a vengeance. From AccuWeather, Northeast braces for coldest weekend of winter with snow, rapid freeze-up. Yep, that's what chemical ice nucleation does. For some, the report says. Some, yeah. Like in the Great Lakes region where you can pile up snow in Erie, Pennsylvania, Buffalo, New York, and you can take a walk to the next few blocks over where there's maybe no snow. That's how isolated some of these engineered storms are. The report says those traveling in or spending time outdoors in the Northeast this weekend will face some of the most extreme cold of the entire winter in terms of actual temperatures and how it feels, the wind chill. The initial blast of cold air will bring a burst of snow to some areas, I just went over that, followed by a rapid freeze-up and harsh gusty winds. Just went over all of that too, didn't I? The snow will pivot from the Great Lakes region. What's that mean? The snow will become more powdery and wet, and slushy areas will quickly freeze. They're going to change the mix as this engineered mayhem unfolds. After a morning high of 35 degrees Fahrenheit, temperatures will plunge through the 20s and into the teens, causing 1 to 3 inches of snow and slush to freeze solid, creating difficult commutes. It's especially difficult with surfactant-soaked frozen material. It's like soap-soaked snow. Surfactants are what makes soap slippery, and they're a part of the climate engineering operations. And those who have driven in snow through their entire lives, if they've been around a long time, know this material is very different. They say temperatures will bottom out just above 0. And while I'm covering the next few headlines, keep in mind this week, Montana near the Canadian border had temperatures pushing the mid-70s in some locations. Think about that. The next subtitle in this headline states, Wicked Winds, Dangerously Low AccuWeather Real Field Temperatures, aka wind chill, which they sometimes show on the maps as if they make it look like it's ambient temperatures to freak people out with how cold it is, but it's really a wind chill. The report then says, this same zone of slippery travel, went over why that is, may reach part of the mid-Atlantic region Sunday night to Monday morning. Another one from AccuWeather, Lake Erie could hit rare 100% ice coverage as freeze-over window narrows. Report says Lake Erie is flirting with a milestone that has happened only a handful of times in the modern record, a complete freeze-over. Now tell me how this happens when you have record warm Great Lakes and suddenly, miraculously, it just flash freezes. And we know this from ponds in Northern California when they've done this to us. How do you have ice over the top of 40-degree water? How does that happen? How do you have ice in, for example, Boston Harbor or other places on ocean water with 40-degree ocean water when seawater doesn't freeze till 28.4 degrees? How does that happen? Chemical ice nucleation is how it happens. They're doing it on an inconceivable scale, including in the Arctic, and that's how they pretend the Arctic ice is bigger than it actually is. Record low volume right now. And they're counting any area of, for example, Arctic Ocean that's 15% slush or more, they call that ice pack. Isn't that 85% ocean? How many people know what's really going on there instead of listening to some mindless carbon fuel industry talking head that tells people what they want to hear? And no, I don't like Al Gore either. No, I don't like the environmental groups at all. They're all criminal hypocrites. But that doesn't change reality. And the reality is we're circling the drain. From the report, ice coverage surged from just 2% on January 14th to 85% on the 21st. 1 week. Tell me how that happens on record warm Great Lakes. So, for the record, anyone that thinks the flash freeze of Lake Erie is just nature or a, quote, sign of a coming ice age, while the rest of the world is in full-blown meltdown, search Lake Michigan ice balls, look at the images, and try to convince yourself that the 75-pound perfectly spherical balls are just nature, just natural. The movement of the chemical ice nucleation saturated surface of these lake waters eventually forms the chemically nucleated basketball-sized spheres. Great Lakes chemical ice nucleation snowmaking conveyor. They manipulate extremely strong surface zonal wind flows that pick up moisture from those lakes, or they blow moisture across the lakes, chemically nucleating it and, again, piling up in regions like Erie, Pennsylvania, Buffalo, New York, sensationalized headlines, and saying nothing about the, oh yeah, it's record low snow all over the U.S. West. Record-shattering snow drought. I'll get to that. Earlier in the week and further down the coast, there was this nor'easter bomb cyclone hammers Carolinas with record snow, intense winds. That's from Fox. The biggest snow in years is falling in the southeast, triggering hundreds of accidents on slick roads. Went over the slick roads part. That's from CNN. Snow and blizzards move into U.S. East Coast, 85 dead from last week's storm. That's just what we know about, and that's not counting the iguanas, is it? AccuWeather reported, quote, thunder freezing rain. Yes, thunder freezing rain. The chemical ice nucleated kind. How shockingly obvious can it be at this point that something's radically wrong everywhere? Here's some other wrong scenarios. Rain turning over to snow. It's often starting at well above freezing temperatures. They eventually drop because this process does cool the air down, but I've seen it snow in Northern California at 44 degrees, 45 degrees. How about that? Nature? No. Chemical ice nucleation. If you don't know about that process, please search geoengineeringwatch.org engineering winter weather. You can see actual lab tests of chemical ice nucleating elements being put into a beaker of water. We just posted a full report on this, showing the test. Freezes it instantly. Think of the first aid kit, sits on your shelf at home, room temperature, 20 years, mix the endothermic reacting elements together, you have ice instantly. They're doing that on a massive scale, and we get to breathe it all, drink it all, and eat it all as it soaks into everything. And don't forget the baseball and softball size hail that's now everywhere, so much so that insurance no longer covers hail anything. And oh yeah, what about the warm sides, the so-called winter storms, the kind that are generated out of the record warm Gulf of Mexico or the record warm Gulf of California? The completely engineered kind. You don't have a warm side to a winter storm, and it sure doesn't come from the record warm Gulf of Mexico, but it does now. Didn't used to. And across the pond, the Russians, they're doing exactly the same to their so far still asleep at the wheel populations. From timesworld.com, Moscow snow mayhem. Heaviest snowfall in over 200 years. From that report, Moscow experienced its heaviest snowfall in more than 200 years, with snow piles reaching up to 60 centimeters in parts of the Russian capital. That's according to Moscow State University. The unprecedented blizzard caused by deep cyclones and sharp atmospheric fronts disrupted commuter trains and blocked streets, leaving cars stranded and residents struggling to navigate the city. Images circulating online show snow reaching the second story of buildings and roads completely buried. Earlier this month, I covered this on the broadcast as well, Kamchatka declared a state of emergency after a massive snowstorm paralyzed that region. Yes, the most extreme snowfall event in the over 200 years of historical record-keeping in Moscow. Just a coincidence, right? Just harmless sky-covering jet exhaust being spewed out of geoengineering heavy aircraft that are crisscrossing skies all over the world, non-commercial routes, grid patterns, X patterns, ovals, back and forth, transponders turned off, just jet exhaust, right? Not so much. And yes, the Chinese government has long since stated they are routinely and have been engineering massive winter weather events, often causing extreme damage, but our government would never do that to us, would they? From an endless and growing list of total aggression, resource wars, to 9/11, to CV-19, to relentless weather warfare, how can so many be so blind, waving their flags without having or wanting a clue about what's actually going on in the world and what sources of power are actually behind it? Those who print the money. That's the top of the power pyramid. What about the Japanese government? They would never winter weather warfare their citizens with climate engineering and chemical ice nucleation operations, would they? From numerous sources, record-breaking snowfall causes devastation in Japan, leaving dozens dead and injured. Do we see much of this on TV Matrix Media? Short answer, no. There's more. From snowbrains.com, at least 35 killed after weeks of heavy snowfall in Japan. From that report, at least 35 people have been killed and nearly 400 injured after an extended period of extreme snowfall dumped up to 6.5 feet of snow across parts of northern Japan, with authorities now warning that rising temperatures could trigger dangerous avalanches. Yep, chemical cool down, weather, whiplash, warm up immediately afterward. Still more, AccuWeather. Snow piles nearly 7 feet high as deadly storms bury northern Japan. So with all this targeted chemical snow in specific regions of major military countries, where would you go to find a warm place to hang out? You need to head to the Arctic. From AlaskaNews.com, record warmth moves into Alaska. How about that? Just like the New Orleans blizzard in 2025 when it was raining and far above freezing in much of the polar regions, Alaska, Greenland, Siberia, Iceland, while it was blizzarding in New Orleans. Same thing this year. Same thing. When the Florida snowstorm was happening, it was warmer in Greenland. And does everybody remember the deep freeze in Texas about 4 years ago when it was below zero in Dallas? On the same day, it was 33 degrees warmer at the North Pole. How many know that? So with all this chemical mix, this plethora of toxic elements falling down on us, how's the air doing? Not so good. The UK Daily Mail, thousands in 2 states told to stay indoors as air fills with heart attack-causing toxins. Yeah, those nanoparticles are really, really bad. Doesn't matter what the material is, but if material is bad also on top of the small particles, that's truly a detrimental mix. This report says air quality meters from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the one they're trying to gut everything with, by the way, they're trying to cover all this up. You might not be hearing about this kind of dangerous situation for much longer. Sounded the alarm on Tuesday, showing unsafe conditions in parts of Florida and Georgia. Yeah, right in the middle of that big cool down. Imagine that. Live tracking data captured sharply elevated levels of PM2.5, microscopic particles composed of toxic compounds and heavy metals. Wow, just like climate engineering patents, that's a coincidence, that are small enough to penetrate the lungs, inflame the respiratory system, and even contribute to heart attacks. What aren't they reporting here? They're not reporting nanoparticles. Oh yeah, the kind that you could fit 100,000 across the width of a single human hair that makes PM2.5 look like a boulder. Nanoparticles far more harmful, and a mountain of them going completely unreported because they're not even looking for them, let alone telling you about them. The report says even short-term exposure to high levels of these particles can cause concerning health problems, including irritation of the eyes, throat, and nose. Hearing from people all over in these areas having exactly that. High pressure in both areas of Georgia and Florida registered above 1,020 millibars on Tuesday. Let's stop there. Question. Are directional ionosphere heater installations like HARP, which are a core component of climate engineering operations, a part of this equation? Why would we think otherwise? And about all the toxic air at the surface, even in the middle of winter, what an incredible opportunity for profit for Big Pharma and their endless list of breathing trouble concoctions. Every other commercial on Matrix Media, breathing problem concoction. So as the entire planet is poisoned and your life support systems start to unravel, can we just print money? Will that fix everything? Not so much. How many times over how many years have I stated on this broadcast and other interviews, as the planet's life support systems do collapse, and they are, so-called industrialized, militarized civilization will follow. It cannot be otherwise. With that in mind, from the UK Guardian, flawed economic models mean climate crisis could crash global economy, experts warn. Experts? Really? Again, that's like warning someone that if they jump off a 100-story building, the landing could be rough on the sidewalk. Could, may, might be rough. There's no could, may, might in this equation. There's no question. As the planet implodes, so will industrialized, militarized civilization, and we're well on that path right now. The report says, quote, states and financial bodies are using modeling that ignores shocks from extreme weather and climate tipping points. There's more. Flawed economic models mean accelerating impact of the climate collapse could, may, might lead to a global financial crash. Recovery would be far harder, the report says, than after the 2008 crash. They said, as we can bail out the banks, but we can't bail out the earth. Let's stop there and correct the record. Recovery won't be harder than 2008. It will be impossible. No functional planet, no people. Simple. The report then states current economic models used by governments and financial institutions entirely miss such shocks. That's not an accident. They don't want the public to panic. The researchers stated that, quote, instead, forecasting that steady economic growth will be slowed only by gradually rising average temperatures. This is because the models assume the future will behave like the past, despite the burning of carbon fuels pushing the climate system into uncharted territory. And let's not forget the climate engineering elephant in this equation, which is weather warfare. There's no benevolence in climate engineering. That's simply a cover-up for the crown jewel weapon of the controllers. They can use nature as a weapon. And that's exactly what they're doing. Final excerpt from this report, tipping points such as the collapse of critical Atlantic currents or the Greenland ice sheet would have global consequences, you think, for society. Some are thought to be at or very close to their tipping points. Nope, we're through the guardrail. All major planetary boundaries have already been breached. So let's stop there in this report. First, the public has indeed been well programmed to falsely believe that the future will behave like the past. In this case, that's like, again, believing that the final 10 feet of falling from a 1,000-foot high-rise building will be just like the previous 990 feet of falling, and thinking we're flying. Not so much. Next stop, the pavement. From MSN, evidence is mounting that the sixth mass extinction has begun. That's all I'll read from that headline because that's simply a blatant, glaring lie. It hasn't just begun. We're now free-falling into the exponential advanced stages with climate engineering further fueling all of it on top of the endless list of other planet-destroying human activities. And yes, it is an all-the-above equation with climate engineering at the top of the list. From MSN, former U.S. officials warn of impending widespread collapse of American agriculture. That doesn't sound good, does it? Sounds like empty shelves coming to a store near you soon. The report says major players in the agricultural industry are sounding an economic alarm in a joint letter, according to the New York Times. It's not really an economic situation in the end, is it? It's an existential situation. No food, no people. So, about the chemically cooled populations in the eastern U.S. that believe the rest of the world must be the same, which is exactly what the controllers and the climate engineers want them to think, not so much. I'll get to that in a moment. You're listening to the weekly installment of Global Alert News, the Bad News Broadcast, installment number 548, February 7th, 2026. This is Dane Wigington, your host, Global Alert News, brought to you by Geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of climate intervention operations known as geoengineering. And that includes not just what you see in the skies, crisscross patterns, X's, ovals, etc. It's also chemical ice nucleation operations, which you can't see above the opaque cloud canopy in so many locations. But if you're in a quiet place like I live in Northern California, when they're chemically nucleating, you can certainly hear the parade of jets above. It sounds like you're at the end of an LAX runway. Chemical ice nucleation, engineered winter weather, core component of climate engineering. Global Alert News is aired on a number of AM and FM stations around the country. If any radio station near you is willing to air the GAN broadcast in order to inform their listeners of what Matrix Media won't mention, have them contact us at admin@geoengineeringwatch.org. We'll grant them access to our weekly broadcast files for free, of course. Recordings of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News Hour broadcast can be found on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. Under the recent column and on the Dane Wigington YouTube channel. If you're on our email list, please put us on your email contact book so that our mailouts don't go to the spam files. Please help us to share the groundbreaking documentary, The Dimming, which fully exposes the climate engineering atrocities with solid, verifiable proof. That's a tool that will wake people up. Please help us to circulate it. We posted that for free the day it was done. The best way to share is by circulating the direct link to The Dimming by email directly from the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. Sharing directly helps us to overcome social media censorship. When viewing our YouTube of The Dimming or Global Alert News or any other Geoengineering Watch video on YouTube, please subscribe, share, and comment. All of this helps us to circulate this very important data to a much wider audience. Again, about reaching those that still are not looking up, start a conversation with Geoengineering Watch awareness-raising materials. They can be found on our homepage. Our only goal, provide activists what they need to move this fight forward as fast as possible. Extremely high-quality printed materials, shocking images, and we do pass these on. The printed materials we pass on for less than our cost of producing and shipping. We have also Geoengineering Watch hoodies, shirts. Photos of these are on our homepage. We have scannable business cards. Those are very effective. And bumper stickers. All of these help start the conversation on the existential threat taking place in our skies. Reaching a critical mass of awareness on the climate engineering onslaught is the great imperative of our time. If we can expose it, we can stop it from the inside out. Many wheels in the battle will turn on their own if we can simply blow this issue out into the open where it can no longer be hidden in plain sight, no pun intended. And every week, in every broadcast, I want to express my most profound gratitude to every single individual that's doing their best to sound the alarm, in spite of the resistance that comes from family and often former friends, because so many don't want the truth. They want someone to lie to them. But that's not going to hold up for much longer, because the truth is going to land in our laps very soon. The tidal wave of total collapse is already unfolding. Moving on, in places where the chemical cold is not. From Yahoo News, record warmth for first week of February in Montana. Touched on that earlier. Temperatures pushing into the mid-70s near the Canadian border, while it's in the 20s with wind chills well below zero in Florida. Really? The report says Thursday will likely be the warmest day this week and maybe one of the warmest days ever recorded in Montana in February. Numerous locations will likely set daily high records, but some towns like Great Falls and Lewiston could set their all-time warmest February temperatures with, again, temps 70-degree range. And also, the whole West is warm. And over a geographic area that's 10 or 20 times larger than, say, Florida, they'll only record a dozen or so record highs, when in a much smaller region, they'll record 10 or 20 times more. And that's part of how they hide how severe the meltdown actually is. With climate engineering making it worse, every single engineered cool down comes at the cost of an even worse overall meltdown. Keep that in mind. From the New York Times, snow drought in the West reaches record levels. That does not bode well. Summer 2026 is going to be hell on earth. Wait and see. From the Smithsonian Magazine, snow drought hits the western United States, worrying experts about the region's water supply. They're just now really starting to get worried. Search engineered drought catastrophe target California. I did that presentation, that live presentation, well over a decade ago, and it is more accurate today than the day I did it. Why did it take the so-called academic community so long to start facing the truth and to begin telling it? Because they can no longer hide it. This report says snow melt from the mountains provides 75% of the West's yearly water. While winter weather blanketed much of the United States in snow last week, just a blanket of chemical snow that tends to sublimate. There's no real runoff. And they completely skew the equation with that. They skew the record taking by shallow layers of chemical surface cold. which then provides fodder for the mindlessly moronic rants of the coming ice agers or all those that want to pretend the flash freak chemical cool downs are somehow a sign of global cooling and they ignore the meltdown all over the rest of the country and the rest of the world. Final excerpt from this report. Scientists can't pinpoint the exact reasons for the region's recent weather conditions, since it's difficult to attribute the snow drought to climate change alone. Yes, it is, because the disruption of the hydrological cycle is most directly connected to the completely out of control global climate engineering Manhattan Project. What will it take to get the population to wake up, look up, and understand that we face an extremely near-term existential threat from what's taking place in our skies? From extremetemps.com, Ohio farmers face weather whiplash. Yep. After the chemical cool down comes the whiplash warm-up. From Yahoo News, farmers devastated as key crop becomes harder to grow. Cultivation is now under threat. In this case, this report is referring to that nation that has been under weather warfare operations for at least 40 years. They've admitted on the floor of the UN, or they've disclosed on the floor of the UN. I wonder who's doing that to Iraq. Destabilize the food supply, destabilize the populations, destabilize the country that has the most oil. Yep, that's how it works. Iran has been on the floor of the UN emphatically stating for decades that NATO and Israel has been cutting off their precipitation. And this is not about whether or not you like Iranian culture or their government. It's about weather warfare. And the same is happening all over the world, including the United States of America. This report says a once reliable source of food and income, Iraq's fig trees, and figs are very tough, are dying off due to relentless drought, cutting off their rain, leaving farmers struggling for their livelihoods. Just 2 years ago, a single tree could produce 25 to 40 crates of figs per season, with each crate weighing up to 20 kilograms. Today, a single tree produces just one 15 to 20 kilogram crate. Think about that. That's a crash. It's a total crash. Same is happening in California. Why? Because the same operations are being carried out here. If you think that those that truly control power care any more about us, Americans, than they do the Iraqis or the other even much more oppressed people in the Middle East, think again. Report says Iraq's shrinking fig yields are just one example of how rising global temperatures are reshaping agriculture. It's not just the rising temperatures. Indian climate engineering is making that worse also. Every single drop of rain is toxic. The ozone layer is now destroyed. We are absolutely moving toward impact at total velocity, very near-term impact. Let's keep going. For those that don't know, the entire fishbowl biosphere of planet Earth is, as I stated earlier, completely contaminated. And before I get to the breaking headline to confirm that fact, I just want to make mention of something encouraging before I forget. We have a new and important ally in this battle, Rocket Man, America's first space tourist. I've had the pleasure of numerous recent conversations with Rocket Man in the last 2 weeks. He is fully committed to this battle. He is in a position to help, and having seen our dying planet from space, he is absolutely with us. Again, the nicknamed Rocket Man was the first official space tourist. Back to our ever more contaminated planet. This headline from SciTech Daily: the planet is being coated in a chemical that never goes away. The report then states the chemical that helped save the ozone layer may be quietly seeding the planet with an indestructible pollutant. Let's stop there for a moment. First, nothing is saving the ozone layer that's getting worse by the day. Climate engineering at the core of that equation. And there you have the tech solution, where the new tech solution is actually worse than the tech it replaced. That's the norm. The report says the researchers warn that the problem is not slowing down. Nope, it's speeding up. They say scientists are still working to fully understand the risks associated with TFA. That's the pollutant. Let's stop there. So, did not understanding the risks keep the scientists, from scattering it all over the globe, along with PFAS forever chemicals, which are everywhere also, every single drop of rain? And let's not forget the 40 to 60 million tons of highly toxic climate engineering nanoparticles. Oh, and also the 2,400 nuclear detonations and drill baby drill, frack baby frack, polluting groundwater all over the globe. What a circus of insanity. This is a recipe for extremely near-term global omnicide. That's our next destination if we remain on the current course. On that note, from phys.org, a crisis emerges across the U.S. as forever chemicals quietly contaminate drinking water wells. Yep, It's not just fracking. When every single drop of rain is toxic, guess where it ends up? But wait, we can just go out and buy bottled water, right? That's all good. Not so much. New headline on that subject, also from phys.org. Some bottled water is worse than tap for microplastics, study shows. How much microplastics? I think some are shown to have a couple 100,000 nanoparticles in a bottle. That's staggering. And for those that don't already know, nanoparticle polymers are a core component in many of the climate engineering dispersions. So it's not just decomposing plastics that are causing these nanoparticle polymers to show up everywhere. Look up climate engineering operations, 40 to 60 million tons dispersed into our skies annually based on precipitation tests and extrapolating, projecting that globally 40 to 60 million tons. And they tell us it's cooling the planet, or at least it's supposed to. How's that working out? From Reuters, Greenland shatters temperature record, redrawing economy from fishing to minerals. Greenland, the Arctic island, the report says, coveted by U.S. President Donald Trump, experienced its warmest January on record this year as a rate of warming 4 times faster than the global average redraws the outlook for sectors from fishing to mining. Yeah, if you want to get warm weather, head from Florida to Greenland. How about that? Or Alaska. Almost forgot. Or you could head to the other side of the world. Maybe it's colder in Australia. From the UK Guardian, more than 80% of flying fox colonies wiped out as January heat waves kill thousands. Go online, search this subject, and take a look at these poor innocent creatures that are being wiped out from a planet in total meltdown, with the epitome of human insanity playing God with the weather, toxic elements spewing everywhere, and populations that have so far been fast asleep at the wheel, although that is rapidly changing. Heads are now being ripped out of the sand. Let's add this from AA.com. Heat waves kill thousands of fish in Australia. For those that don't know, fisheries are collapsing all over the globe. And if you do happen to catch a wild-caught fish, you can rest assured it is toxic, period. Peer-reviewed study proves that. In fact, 500 wild-caught fish in the U.S., 500 different locations, all of them toxic. And the science report concluded eating one of those toxic wild-caught fish in America was equivalent to drinking a month's worth of tainted water. Oh boy. From extremetemps.com. After the historic January heat wave, February started with some cold records in Australia. Yeah, that's how it works. The swinging pendulum of weather warfare. If one area heads too far into meltdown, they'll give it a quick chemical flash freeze and call it good. From the New York Times, former farming leaders warn U.S. agriculture could face widespread collapse. No, there's no could, may, might. Collapse is already well underway and accelerating by the day. Moving on, before I get to the next headline, let's consider a few statistics that most don't know about. We're nearing, I believe, the 600th month in a row of above normal global temperatures. If we look at unfiltered frontline temperature data, the planet has actually warmed something in the range of 3.5 degrees C. That's about 6.5 degrees Fahrenheit since pre-industrial baselines. That's being systematically hidden because they don't want populations to panic. And the chemical cool downs, as I expressed, there are so many that try to pretend that's some sign of a coming ice age or global cooling. And even though the second those chemical cool downs are gone, the record warms return, there's record warms all over the globe, and yet they continue to push their moronic narratives. And here's an example, yet again, from an appropriately named Dr. Circus. Yeah, name is fitting in this case. Here's the headline. Conditions are starting to look like the beginning of the next mini ice age. Really, Dr. Circus. He says more than 240 million people across more than 40 states, and that's the kind of headlines, again, the controllers and the climate engineers love, and apparently Dr. Circus loves it as well. From Arizona to Maine were slammed by a historic winter storm that extended over 2,300 miles and delivered deadly snow and ice. He says in the South, where catastrophic ice accumulation snapped swaths of trees and brought down power lines, leaving communities in life-threatening conditions, global cooling is just the beginning, he says. And already we see that life itself could hang on a thread. Wow. At least he has that last part right, but he sure doesn't have the global cooling part right. Never says a word about climate engineering and chemical ice nucleation. Never says a word about the 100 record highs compared to 1 record low statistically that has just happened in Florida. Not a word about any of that. That's serious, selective, so-called reporting from so-called Dr. Circus. Maybe that's his real name. I don't know. Here's a new headline on the insect collapse front, and this should scare the hell out of people. I first published data on the insect decline. We were the first major source to do so in 2014 or 2013, and we had the so-called science community try to marginalize us. I reported this from my work with former government scientists, and now they're having to admit it because they can't hide it any longer. From the UK Daily Mail, ominous warning for humanity as insects mysteriously fall silent. It's not mysterious. The UV is frying them because climate engineering is destroying the ozone layer. Every single drop of rain is toxic. These are very small organisms, so they succumb sooner than we do because we're a larger organism, but we will follow in their footprints soon. Continuing with this report, the short lifespans of insects, their high metabolisms, and reliance on environmental cues make them exceptionally vulnerable to chemical, nutritional, and electromagnetic disruptions, often long before humans show obvious signs of illness. Increasing evidence links many of these same exposures to human endocrine disruption, immune dysfunction, neurodevelopmental effects, and metabolic disease. Yes, we are definitely circling the drain. And what happens then, as I've stated on this broadcast for so many years, when biosphere collapse beat the power structure to the proverbial intersection, they would become incredibly desperate and dangerous, and that time is unfolding now. With that in mind, from Fox News, Pentagon warns future wars may hit U.S. soil as direct military threats grow. The Pentagon's newly released National Defense Strategy warns that future wars may no longer be fought solely overseas, arguing that the U.S. military must be prepared to conduct combat operations directly from the American homeland as adversaries gain the ability to strike the United States itself. I'll stop there. How many Americans are going to continue to buy into the very naive notion that those who truly hold the levers of power give a damn about them while they're waging toxic weather warfare on U.S. populations day in and day out, not to mention all the other forms of warfare being waged on U.S. civilians, trying to break them down slowly but surely, much faster now. These people don't care about us. And this isn't a political issue. How many people are still buying into the left, right, Democrat, Republican, conservative, liberal, orchestrated script of divide and conquer? How many people still buying into that? Those aren't the people in power. The people you see on the stage are not the people in power. They're just simply the puppets that are tasked with polarizing, dividing populations until the moment of impact. How absurdly futile all the war machine everything is on a dying planet. So many somehow mindlessly believe that their half of the Titanic will never sink. Good luck with that. And where should we imagine all the Matrix minions will be when the water comes over the deck of the sinking ship? In the bunker, below the new $400 million ballroom at the White House. Don't think that bunker actually exists? Investigate for yourself. You won't like what you learn. More power structure desperation from Reuters. Russia's officials say world should be alarmed if nuclear arms control treaty expires. Senior Russian security officials have warned that the danger of letting the last U.S.-Russian nuclear arms control treaty expire this week without any understanding of what comes next, suggesting it would speed up the doomsday clock. Yep, the walls are closing in from every direction. More from that report. U.S. President Donald Trump says he has indicated he will let the treaty expire without accepting an offer from Moscow to voluntarily extend its caps on deployments of strategic nuclear weapons. They're all criminals. But with biosphere collapse unfolding by the day, their desperation is far worse now than ever before. Back to meltdown and the 40 million southwestern U.S. Americans that will soon be very thirsty. From Inside Climate News, Colorado River negotiations are nearly out of time, and snowpack, and even the meager amount of snow that has fallen in the West, is chemically nucleated, and a chemically nucleated frozen material tends to sublimate, which means, again, much of it transitions from a solid to a gas, bypassing the liquid phase, the runoff phase. So even the little bit of snow that is in the West is not going to produce much runoff, and the runoff it does produce is toxic. Let's look somewhere else in the world. Tropical islands. They're safe, right? No, not so much. From KawaiiNewsNow.com, 2025 was Hawaii's second driest and warmest year on record. Bottom line, no place to hide from what's taking place in our skies. Again, and that's not to ignore all the other forms of human decimation to the planet. I'm not ignoring that, and nor should anyone else. If we want to have credibility in this fight, we need to approach it accurately, factually. Every form of human activity that affects the energy balance of the planet is part of the problem. Every form of human activity that loots, plunders, pillage, poisons, pollutes the planet, part of the problem. Climate engineering, the biggest single part, but by no means the only part. It's an all-the-above equation. Those that want to move this fight forward will stick to this mantra. We can't have any legitimate discussion about climate, anything from any perspective, without first and foremost addressing climate engineering. Again, that's how we build bridges and not burn them. We all need to move this fight forward from all sides of the fence. So do the weather terrorists, the winter weather terrorists, have more in store for the U.S. coming up? It looks like they do. From severe weather Europe, stratospheric warming confirmed. Polar vortex collapse to bring major weather disruption in the coming weeks. So when you have an ionosphere heater, the biggest one in the world, except the possibility of the one in Antarctica, but with HAARP in Alaska capable of heating the ionosphere to extraordinarily high temperatures, is it any wonder that what is now scheduled is for massively warm regions over the Arctic? While it pushes cold air south, they chemically nucleate that, pull moisture from wherever they can, the record world Gulf of Mexico or anywhere else, to create the little chemical cold bubbles over the most populated portions of the U.S. and Europe to convince those populations that everything's fine, even though the world's in total meltdown. And climate engineering aerosol dispersions in the atmosphere and the frequency transmissions used to manipulate them continue to destroy what little is left of the planet's remaining life support systems. Another headline on the coming scheduled weather: polar meltdown pushing cold air south into Europe and the U.S. From earthmedia.org, meteorologists warn of an unusually early Arctic breakdown forming in February. Again, think ionosphere heater. If you don't know what that is, please look it up. Look up ionosphere heater. There's no speculation on what that weapon of mass destruction does. And there's about 100 around the globe. HAARP is the biggest or the second biggest, but there are many. About collapse, the Earth's cooling systems of ocean currents continue to collapse. From Geomar News, ventilation of the North Atlantic is weakening. That's a feedback loop. The oceans won't absorb carbon as they have. Again, as the ocean currents shut down, so does the heat distribution mechanisms of the planet. That is definitely happening. Climate engineering, which manipulates upper-level wind currents, in turn influences ocean currents. Climate engineering inseparable from everything bad happening on our planet right now. And it's not the only bad. Again, human race has been abysmal stewards of planet Earth. Climate engineering, the epitome of that poor stewardship. One more on the ocean situation. Again, this is very, very bad. From counterpunch.org, ocean heat goes ballistic. How fast is the planet warming? It's about the thermal energy equivalent of 13 Hiroshima bombs per second. In fact, here's a statistic from this report. In 2025 alone, the ocean gained 23 zettajoules of heat. That's a 23 with 18 zeros behind it? Yeah, 18 joules of energy of heat. Let's put some more math on that. That's about 37 years of total global primary energy use at 2023 levels. Yeah, so much for the coming mini ice age, Dr. Circus. In other words, it's equivalent to every power plant, every car, every light bulb, every device on Earth currently and continuously in use for 37 years. That's how much the ocean heated in 2025 alone. There's more. From extremetemps.com, record heat is sweeping nearly all world tropical countries. I could go on and on and on. There's so many headlines, I can't even begin to get to them all. The planet is in total meltdown. Climate engineering operations, aka weather warfare, is further fueling the overall fire. And the only exception to that is the short-term toxic chemical nucleated cooldowns, which come at the cost of an even worse overall meltdown. We find ourselves at a crossroad in human history, or more accurately, human existence. And for the record, the whole of the human race, and indeed the entire web of life, or what's left of it, is hanging by a thread at this point. Is running from the monumental challenges we face as fast as possible a moral, honorable, and courageous decision? No. Should we ask ourselves, are we here for a reason? If the answer is yes, then what is that reason? Is it to learn? Is it to grow, to make a difference, to give back to the whole? If the answer to all those questions is yes, 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 and yes, then what better way to improve who and what we are than to fully face a worthy challenge? Do Olympic champions choose the weakest possible opponent to train with? Would doing so make them stronger or better? No. Embrace the challenge. No matter how daunting it may be, never underestimate the difference you can make, even at this late hour. All that is asked of us is to try. Check the activist suggestions link on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org for specific instructions on how you can make your voice heard. We're late in the game. Every single day counts. Until next week, this is Dane Wigington from geoengineeringwatch.org.